In the quiet suburban town of Wyndham, life seemed to move at a slower, simpler pace. Neighbors exchanged pleasantries, families gathered on porches, and secrets, though buried, sometimes festered just beneath the surface. It was here that Anna Palmer, a 45-year-old woman who had transitioned several years prior, built a seemingly normal life with her husband, Brian Palmer, and his 21-year-old daughter, Lacey Palmer. To outsiders, Anna appeared a dutiful stepmother, supportive, nurturing, quietly reserved. Brian, a mechanic known for his easy smile and short temper, often boasted that he had the perfect family now, unaware of the fracture forming inside his own home. As Lacey matured into adulthood, tensions between her and Anna grew complicated. What had once been a cool, respectful relationship developed undercurrents that neither woman was willing to confront openly. Anna, isolated emotionally by the subtle judgment from Wyndham's conservative community, found herself craving connection, a craving that blurred boundaries she had no right to cross. The first whispers of trouble began when Lacey started withdrawing from her friends and abruptly dropped out of college. She claimed it was stress. Her father blamed laziness. Only Anna seemed to grasp the depth of the young woman's turmoil, but rather than guide her toward healing, she became enmeshed in it. What began as late-night conversations evolved into secret meetings, hidden touches, lines blurred and eventually shattered. In the oppressive quiet of the Palmer house, Anna and Lacey's forbidden relationship took root. A relationship founded on confusion, vulnerability, and manipulation disguised as affection. Neither realized that their secrecy was fragile, and that soon, a simple hospital visit would expose everything they fought to keep hidden, starting a chain reaction that would leave blood on their hands. It began innocently enough, or at least it seemed that way at first. Lacey struggled with depression after dropping out of college, feeling directionless and alienated from her peers. Anna, recognizing those signs of quiet despair, offered comfort late at night when Brian was either asleep or working late shifts at the auto shop. Whispered conversations in the kitchen turned into long, lingering embraces. Anna convinced herself it was harmless, a misplaced maternal instinct perhaps, but the touches lingered too long, the gazes grew too intense. A kiss on the forehead one evening after Lacey burst into tears evolved into something more, something both of them refused to name. In the fragile silence that filled the Palmer household, they found excuses to be near each other. Trips to the grocery store, weekend errands, quiet walks through the forested trails behind the neighborhood. Each shared moment stitched their secret tighter and isolated them further from reality. Lacey, emotionally raw and desperate for love after years of her father's coldness, mistook Anna's affection for salvation. Anna, battling her own demons of rejection and fear of being unloved for who she was, convinced herself that what they shared was unique, fated even. They clung to each other with a recklessness that neither dared examine too closely. But in a small town like Wyndham, secrets have a way of leaking. It started with a neighbor who noticed Lacey and Anna sitting too closely on a park bench, laughing a little too freely. A co-worker of Brian's mentioned seeing them together at a distant shopping mall, Anna's hand lingering on Lacey's back. Brian, at first, dismissed these murmurs as gossip. His wife and daughter? Ridiculous. But doubt, once planted, grows rapidly. He started coming home unexpectedly. Started noticing the guilty silence when he entered the room. The sudden separation between the two women. The way Lacey barely met his eyes anymore. The final fracture came when Lacey fell ill. What she thought was a seasonal cold turned into persistent fatigue, unexplained weight loss, and fevers. After weeks of denial, she was finally persuaded to see a doctor. The results blindsided her. She was HIV positive. The doctor's words rang in her ears, but the question that froze her blood was simple. How? Lacey had been with only one person, and that person was sitting across the dinner table every night, pretending everything was fine. She confronted Anna in a fit of rage and terror, and under the crushing weight of the truth, Anna admitted she had known her HIV status long before their relationship began, and had hidden it out of fear that she would lose the only person who still saw her as human. Lacey's world shattered in an instant. She realized she hadn't been saved. She had been ruined. The night after the confrontation, Lacey packed a suitcase and locked herself in her childhood bedroom, refusing to come out. She ignored Anna's frantic knocks and whispered pleas through the door, her mind a swirling storm of disbelief, shame, and rage. How had she let this happen? How had she been so blind? Anna sat outside the door for hours, whispering apologies, promising that they could fix this, that no one had to know. But the more Anna spoke, the clearer it became to Lacey. There was no repairing this. Brian noticed immediately that something had shifted. At dinner, Lacey wouldn't touch her food. She flinched when Anna reached across the table. Her eyes, once full of cautious affection, were hollow, drained of life. Brian cornered Anna in the garage that night, demanding to know what was going on. Anna, desperate to hold the crumbling facade together, lied. She blamed Lacey's mood swings on a breakup with a college boyfriend, someone Brian had never met. She wove a clumsy story about heartbreak and loneliness, hoping he would buy it. For a moment, Brian seemed to hesitate, but the doubt never fully left his eyes. Meanwhile, Lacey, fueled by a toxic mix of fury and despair, began unraveling in private. She skipped work, stopped returning friends' texts, locked herself in the bathroom for hours. One evening, Brian found her passed out in the tub, empty pill bottles scattered on the floor. She survived, barely, but refused to explain. The hospitalization sent new shockwaves through the community. Whispers turned into accusations. Rumors that the Palmers were hiding something spread like wildfire. Small-town loyalty turned brittle. The family was quietly shunned. Polite but distant invitations, awkward glances at the grocery store, an unexplained withdrawal of clients at Brian's shop. And in the center of it all, Anna fought to maintain control. She pleaded with Lacey to stay silent, to protect the family, to protect herself. She offered gifts, promises of running away together, of starting over somewhere new. But every word only deepened Lacey's hatred. A storm was gathering, silent, inevitable, and when it broke, it would destroy them all. Lacey's hospitalization became the final spark she needed. In her hospital bed, under fluorescent lights that buzzed louder than her own thoughts, she made a decision. She would not be buried under Anna's lies. She would not carry this secret into a future already stained by betrayal. The first small rebellion was almost unnoticed. She called her best friend Megan, someone she'd pushed away during the affair. Through broken sobs, Lacey told her everything. The relationship, the betrayal, the infection. Megan, horrified, promised to keep her confidence. But secrets shared rarely stay contained for long, especially in Wyndham. Days later, Megan's older brother, a local paramedic, overheard a tense phone call and mentioned it at a town diner. Within a week, the whispers transformed into pointed accusations. People no longer simply avoided the Palmers. They stared. Some crossed the street rather than pass Anna on the sidewalk. Anna sensed the shift immediately. She caught the way clerks at the supermarket barely met her eyes, how service at Brian's auto shop slowed to a trickle. Brian blamed the rumors about Lacey's bad behavior, but Anna knew better. Fear gnawed at her. Not just fear of exposure, but fear of losing everything she had clawed to build after a lifetime of rejection. In a final, desperate move, Anna confronted Lacey one night when Brian was working late. She begged, she cried, she threatened. "You don't understand what they'll do to me if they find out," Anna hissed, her voice low and urgent. "They'll ruin me. They'll tear this family apart." But Lacey, hollowed out by pain and betrayal, simply stared back at her, the girl who had once craved Anna's affection, now a stranger carved from ice. "I don't care," Lacey said, her voice calm. "You already ruined me." That same night, Lacey made a second call, this time to a small legal advocacy center in the next county. She didn't know exactly what steps to take yet. She only knew one thing: Anna had taken her future from her. And now, she was going to take Anna's. Across town, Brian sat alone in the darkened garage, staring into the depths of a half-repaired transmission, feeling the first sharp edge of a truth he still couldn't name. The air around the Palmer family was thickening, tightening like a noose. Lacey's call to the advocacy center put events into motion faster than she expected. 2 days later, she was sitting in a sterile, windowless office across from a woman named Dana Wexler, a soft-spoken but sharp-eyed counselor who specialized in cases involving abuse and HIV-related disputes. Lacey, voice trembling but determined, laid everything bare. The affair, Anna's undisclosed HIV status, the emotional manipulation. Dana listened without interrupting, occasionally scribbling notes. When Lacey finished, the room felt unbearably heavy. "This is serious," Dana said quietly. "If you want to move forward, we'll need to document everything, and you'll need to prepare yourself. Once this starts, it won't be private anymore." Lacey nodded. She was beyond fear now. What had been done to her deserved light, no matter the cost. Meanwhile, Anna sensed something shifting in the air at home. Lacey was no longer passive. She moved with cold determination, avoided Anna entirely, and spent long hours locked in her room with her phone. Panic rooted itself deep in Anna's gut. She had already lost Lacey's love. Now she was about to lose everything else: her marriage, her home, her carefully built identity. In a last-ditch effort to regain control, Anna staged a confrontation in the kitchen, slamming Lacey's phone against the counter and demanding to know who she had been speaking to. Lacey, unfazed, stared her down. "You can't scare me anymore," Lacey said flatly. Brian walked in just in time to hear the tail end of the exchange, the rage in Anna's voice, the brittle emptiness in Lacey's. He didn't say a word, just watched, and understood finally that something was deeply, catastrophically wrong. That evening, Brian found Lacey sitting on the back porch, knees pulled to her chest. He sat beside her without speaking for a long time. Finally, he asked, "Is there something you need to tell me?" Lacey hesitated. Her loyalty to her father was tangled with shame and fear, but she was tired of protecting people who had never protected her. "Not yet," she said. But soon, across the yard, behind the curtains, Anna watched them, her hands clenched so tightly at her sides that her knuckles turned white. The noose was tightening around all their necks, and the first real rupture was only days away. It didn't take long after the meeting with Dana Wexler for paperwork to begin moving. Lacey authorized an official complaint through the Advocacy Center. They began preparing a formal case: emotional exploitation, reckless endangerment, and criminal transmission of HIV. Dana warned her again. Once the complaint was filed, there would be no putting the genie back into the bottle. Investigators would be involved, police interviews, public records. The whole town would know. Lacey didn't flinch. The damage had already been done. Now she was simply naming it. Anna, however, sensed the shift. She rifled through Lacey's room while she was gone, finding a copy of the Advocacy Center's contact card tucked between textbooks. Her heart slammed painfully against her ribs as she realized Lacey wasn't just angry. She was preparing to destroy her life in a way that no apology or bribe could prevent. That evening, Anna waited until Brian left for a supply run. She cornered Lacey in the hallway with an intensity that bordered on feral. "You think they'll believe you?" Anna hissed, her voice a low, trembling thing. "You think they'll see you as a victim? They'll call you disgusting. They'll say you wanted it." Lacey didn't respond. She simply turned and walked away, leaving Anna trembling with a rage she no longer knew how to contain. Across town, Dana prepared the necessary documents to notify law enforcement. Within 72 hours, Lacey's case would be officially filed. Meanwhile, Brian's confusion grew unbearable. He noticed how Anna would flinch when the phone rang, how Lacey no longer spoke to either of them unless absolutely necessary, how the town's hostility, once vague, had become pointed. Even his oldest clients found excuses not to visit the shop anymore. The final crack came when Megan's mother, Mrs. Holloway, a woman Brian had known for 20 years, stopped him at the hardware store. She didn't speak at first, just stared at him with a look that was half pity, half revulsion. "Brian," she said slowly, "you need to talk to your daughter. You need to know what's really happening in your house." Brian drove home that afternoon with his heart pounding, his hands clenching the steering wheel until his knuckles turned white. He didn't confront Anna immediately. Instead, he waited. He watched. He needed the truth straight from Lacey, and he suspected he would hear it soon enough. But Anna knew she was running out of time, and with every hour that passed, she grew more certain. If she couldn't stop Lacey with words, she might have to stop her another way. It was a gray Thursday morning when Lacey signed the final documents at the Advocacy Center. Dana Wexler watched her with a mixture of pride and concern. Filing a criminal complaint wasn't just about seeking justice. It meant dragging every buried secret into public view. It meant war. Within hours, an official report was delivered to the Windham Police Department. The accusations were serious enough to warrant immediate investigation: criminal HIV transmission, sexual exploitation, and abuse of trust. When Lacey returned home that afternoon, the house felt different, heavier somehow, as if the walls themselves sensed what was coming. Brian was waiting for her in the kitchen. He didn't shout. He didn't accuse. He simply asked, voice low and worn, "Tell me what's happening, Lacey." The dam inside her broke. Lacey told him everything, stumbling at first, then faster, as if afraid she might lose her nerve. The secret relationship, the infection, the manipulation, the betrayal. Brian sat in stunned silence. His face was blank, but his hands shook as they clutched the edge of the table. When Lacey finished, the silence between them was almost unbearable. "She said she loved me," Lacey whispered at last, tears burning her eyes. "But she ruined me." Brian stood up slowly, every movement stiff and mechanical. Without a word, he walked outside, slamming the door so hard that a framed photo fell off the wall. Upstairs, Anna had been listening. She had heard everything. Her mind raced. Every escape plan she had rehearsed dissolved. There was no running now, no negotiating, no forgiveness. In the dim light of the bedroom, Anna opened the nightstand drawer and stared at the small revolver tucked neatly inside, a leftover from Brian's late father, long forgotten. Her hands hovered over it. Across town, the first ripple of official action had begun. Officers reviewed the complaint. An investigator, Detective Karen Holt, was assigned to the case. The Advocacy Center arranged for Lacey's protection if needed. Temporary housing, emergency contacts. No one said it aloud, but everyone understood. Cases like this could turn violent before they turned legal. Inside the Palmer house, the atmosphere thickened into something combustible. Brian didn't return that night. He slept at a friend's house, leaving Lacey alone under the same roof as Anna. And Anna, pacing like a caged animal, realized something with chilling clarity. If she couldn't have Lacey's silence, then no one could have Lacey at all. The house was eerily silent the night after Lacey's confession. Outside, rain lashed the windows in cold, relentless sheets. But inside, it was the heavy, unnatural stillness that suffocated. Lacey stayed locked in her bedroom, her dresser shoved against the door as a pathetic barrier. Her heart pounded so loudly she could hear it in her ears. She didn't know exactly what Anna was capable of, but every instinct screamed that she was in real danger. Anna moved quietly downstairs, almost floating through the darkness. In one hand, she gripped the revolver, her palms slick with sweat. Every few steps, she paused, listening for movement, for a sign that Lacey was awake. Part of her still hesitated. Part of her remembered the laughter they once shared, the feeling of belonging she'd clung to like a drowning woman. But that part was buried now, crushed beneath humiliation, terror, and the primal need to reclaim control. Meanwhile, across town, Detective Karen Holt reviewed the case files late into the night. The allegations were serious, the timeline disturbingly credible. She made a decision. In the morning, she would formally request protective measures for Lacey. It was a move that might come too late. Back at the Palmer house, Anna made her way upstairs, every creaking step vibrating through the floorboards. She stood outside Lacey's door, listening to the faint sounds of movement inside. Her fingers tightened around the weapon. Inside the room, Lacey clutched her phone with trembling hands, debating whether to call the police. She hadn't yet. A foolish part of her still hoped that if she stayed quiet, if she waited just a little longer, Anna would give up, retreat. Suddenly, the door handle rattled violently. The dresser scraped forward under pressure. "Lacey!" Anna's voice came low and muffled through the wood. "We need to talk. Open the door." Lacey didn't move. She barely breathed. The rattling stopped. Silence. And then a deafening crack. Anna kicking the door with all her strength, splintering the frame. Lacey screamed and scrambled backward as the dresser shifted. She dialed 911 with shaking fingers, whispering for help, barely able to get the words out. Downstairs, headlights swept across the living room window. Brian's truck. Anna froze. For one terrifying second, she seemed to weigh her options. And then, she fled down the stairs, disappearing into the darkness just as Brian slammed through the front door, soaking wet and wild-eyed. He found Lacey sobbing in the corner of her room, the door barely hanging on its hinges. She didn't have to explain. He understood instantly. And somewhere in the night, Anna vanished. Revolver still in hand, a fugitive from the family she had already destroyed. The official bulletin went out before sunrise. Be on the lookout for Anna Palmer, considered armed and dangerous. Detective Karen Holt took personal command of the search. She canvassed the town, issuing warnings to anyone who might be harboring Anna, including sympathetic acquaintances who might have once called her a friend. But Wyndham had turned its back on Anna long before her secrets surfaced. No one was willing to protect her now. Brian packed a bag for Lacey and drove her to a safe house arranged by the Advocacy Center. It was a battered, anonymous apartment on the edge of town, sparse but secure. Lacey barely spoke during the drive, staring out the window with empty eyes. At the safe house, Dana Wexler met them, her presence calm and professional. She went over basic safety protocols. Don't open the door for strangers. Don't post updates online. Don't return home under any circumstances without police clearance. Lacey nodded robotically. She wasn't afraid anymore. She was numb. Meanwhile, Anna remained hidden. She moved from motel to motel, using cash, changing clothes, blending in with the tired faces and downturned eyes of transient America. But no matter how far she tried to run, the truth weighed heavier with each step. She had lost everything. And the slow realization hardened into something more dangerous than desperation. A single, consuming thought. If I can't have peace, neither can she. In a motel outside Wyndham, Anna bought a burner phone. She dialed Lacey's number, once, twice, but the calls went unanswered. She left no messages, only stared at the screen as if willing the connection back into existence. Brian, furious and terrified, returned to the Palmer home only under police escort. Detectives combed through the house, gathering evidence. The broken bedroom door, Lacey's 911 call recording, the empty drawer where the revolver once sat. Each piece added to the grim portrait of Anna's mental collapse. Detective Holt made it clear, if Anna resurfaced, it would likely be to finish what she started. Tension gripped Wyndham like a vice. Parents pulled their children closer. Locks were double-checked. The Palmer name, once a quiet staple of the community, became a whispered cautionary tale. Brian stayed glued to his phone, sleeping in short, broken intervals, dreading the call that he knew would come. The call that said Anna had been found, one way or another. But Lacey knew better. Anna wouldn't surrender quietly. She was a storm-gathering force. And storms always come home. The safe house was meant to be secure, anonymous, untraceable. But Wyndham was a small town, and no safe place stays hidden forever when desperation sharpens into cunning. Anna spent her days trailing the outskirts of Wyndham, watching, waiting. She had nothing left but the ache for revenge. In a stroke of luck or cruelty, she spotted Dana Wexler one afternoon as the counselor left the Advocacy Center. Anna followed at a distance, blending with the late-shift workers and exhausted grocery clerks. Dana, unaware she was being watched, drove toward the safe house after her shift, intending to check on Lacey. Anna tailed her carefully, keeping back at intersections, weaving through traffic with the precision of a predator stalking prey. By dusk, Anna knew exactly where Lacey was hiding. The sun had just dipped below the horizon when Anna parked 2 blocks away, concealed behind an abandoned delivery van. She watched the windows of the safe house flicker with soft lamplight. She could see movement, a shadow crossing the living room. Her grip tightened on the revolver in her lap. Inside the apartment, Lacey sat curled on the couch, reading through paperwork Dana had left for her. Court statements, upcoming procedures, victim services. Every word felt clinical, detached from the brutal intimacy of what she had endured. She didn't notice the flicker of a figure outside the window, didn't sense the presence gathering like a storm at her door. Meanwhile, Brian, unable to sit idle, had convinced Detective Holt to let him visit Lacey under supervision. He was on his way, headlights cutting through the growing darkness, when the 911 dispatcher received a frantic call. A neighbor had spotted a figure crouched near the back entrance of the safe house, a gun glinting under the porch light. Within minutes, police units were dispatched. But minutes, in moments like these, stretch and twist, and are often too long. Anna moved toward the door, gun raised, her breath steady, mechanical. She wasn't thinking anymore. She was operating on something deeper, a violent certainty that if she couldn't silence Lacey, she would lose everything that remained of herself. Inside, Lacey heard the soft scrape of a lock being tampered with. Her stomach dropped. Instinctively, she grabbed her phone, dialing the emergency number programmed into it, but before she could hit call, the door burst open with a crash. Anna stepped inside, rain dripping from her jacket, the revolver aimed straight at her. Time froze. Lacey stumbled backward, knocking over the coffee table. The paperwork scattered like dying leaves across the floor. Anna's face was unreadable. Not anger, not grief, just a hollow determination. Outside, the first wail of police sirens pierced the night. But inside, it was already too late for calm endings. The revolver in Anna's hand never wavered as she stepped further into the small living room. Lacey stumbled backward until her spine hit the wall. She raised her hands instinctively, trembling, her voice catching in her throat. "Anna, please," she whispered, though she knew words would be useless now. Anna's face was pale, her expression eerily calm. She looked almost detached from the scene, as if watching herself from somewhere far away. Her voice, when she spoke, was flat. "You destroyed me," Anna said. "I gave you everything, and you destroyed me." Lacey shook her head, her own voice rising in desperation. "You hurt me, Anna. You lied to me. You used me. You ruined my life." The sirens outside were growing louder now, faint but approaching. But Anna didn't react. She didn't even seem to hear them. "You could have stayed quiet," Anna said almost tenderly. "You could have stayed mine." Lacey's heart pounded so hard, she thought it might burst. She darted her eyes toward the kitchen, a slim hope that she might make it to the back door, or find something, anything to defend herself. Anna saw the glance, and for the first time, her face twisted, a flash of fury cutting through the numbness. "No," she said, her voice sharp now. "You don't get to leave." She raised the revolver, leveling it at Lacey's chest, and pulled the trigger. The sound shattered the night, a brutal, final crack. Lacey's body jerked, slamming back against the wall before crumpling to the floor. For a moment, there was only silence, broken only by Anna's heavy breathing. Blood pooled rapidly across the cheap linoleum floor. Anna stood over Lacey's body, the gun slackening in her hand, her chest heaving. Whatever satisfaction she had imagined feeling did not come. Only a vast, yawning emptiness swallowed her whole. The front door exploded inward seconds later as Detective Holt and two officers stormed inside, weapons drawn. Anna didn't resist. She dropped the revolver without a word and raised her blood-smeared hands, surrendering to the inevitable. Brian arrived minutes after, too late to save his daughter, too soon to be spared the sight burned into his memory forever. Lacey's body, crumpled and lifeless, the girl he had failed to protect. Outside, flashing red and blue lights painted the street in violent, stuttering colors. Inside, everything was over, and nothing would ever be right again. The Windham County Jail processed Anna Palmer under tight security. The charges filed against her were swift and overwhelming: first-degree murder, criminal HIV transmission, unlawful possession of a firearm, and reckless endangerment. Detective Karen Holt personally escorted her into custody, refusing to look Anna in the eyes as they led her through the steel doors. In the reports, Holt would later write that Anna showed no visible remorse. But the truth was harder to define. Anna moved as if hollowed out, not defiant, not broken, simply emptied. The community of Windham, already strained by months of whispers and distrust, snapped into open outrage. Candlelight vigils appeared outside the courthouse and at the advocacy center, mourning Lacey Palmer, a young woman who had been betrayed by the very person meant to protect her. Newspapers ran front-page stories: family secrets end in tragedy, the murder of Lacey Palmer. Talk radio hosts dissected every lurid detail of the case. Online forums swarmed with commentary, much of it vicious, some even blaming Anna's transgender identity as a cause, an ugly reminder of the prejudices still rooted in the town's soil. Meanwhile, Brian retreated into himself. He refused interviews. He barely ate. Friends and neighbors tried to reach out, but he met them with hollow stares. The garage sat closed, gathering dust and silence. At night, he sat in Lacey's old bedroom, staring at the unmade bed, the textbook still open, the faint scent of her shampoo still lingering in the air. The district attorney announced that the state would seek life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. Dana Wexler, devastated by her own role in inadvertently leading Anna to the safe house, resigned quietly from the advocacy center and left Wyndham for good. At Anna's preliminary hearing, the courtroom was packed. Reporters, former neighbors, strangers who simply wanted to glimpse the monster they believed responsible for destroying a family. Anna appeared in shackles, dressed in a pale gray jumpsuit, her hair unkempt, her face gaunt. She said nothing during the proceedings, offering no plea, no apology. The prosecution painted a clear, damning portrait, a deliberate, calculated act of murder carried out in cold blood after months of emotional manipulation and abuse. Anna's public defender requested a psychological evaluation, hinting at diminished capacity. But the court, the press, and the public had already made up their minds. Anna Palmer was not a person anymore in Wyndham. She was a cautionary tale, a nightmare made real. And Lacey, bright, struggling, innocent Lacey, was gone. Forever. The trial of Anna Palmer was scheduled swiftly, expedited by the severity of the charges and the intense public pressure. The court proceedings drew national attention. Satellite news trucks parked outside the courthouse weeks before jury selection even began. Inside the courtroom, the atmosphere was electric with restrained fury. Court officers stood guard along the walls. Family members of Lacey's friends filled the pews. In the front row, Brian sat stiffly, a shell of the man he once was, his hands clenched so tightly in his lap that his knuckles stayed white. Anna appeared each day in the same gray prison jumpsuit, her hair neatly combed now, but her face still expressionless. She rarely looked up from the defense table. The woman who once charmed a small town into trusting her had vanished completely. The prosecution built their case methodically. They called witnesses who recounted Anna's inappropriate relationship with Lacey. The whispered rumors, at first dismissed as gossip, now re-examined under a brutal spotlight. The forensic pathologist described Lacey's cause of death in stark, clinical terms. Detectives presented evidence from the safe house, the shattered door, the bloodstains, the discarded revolver. The HIV status disclosure, or rather the lack of it, became another powerful point of condemnation. Medical experts testified about the lasting damage caused by Anna's failure to disclose her infection before engaging with Lacey. Prosecutors tied it all together into a chilling portrait, a manipulator who had preyed on a vulnerable young woman, culminating not just in betrayal but in deliberate murder. When Brian was called to testify, the courtroom held its breath. He spoke haltingly at first, describing Lacey's childhood, her stubbornness, her fierce loyalty, her dreams of becoming a teacher. His voice broke when he recounted the final days, the fear in her eyes, the way she shrank away from Anna's touch, the night he found her lifeless body. "I failed her," he said quietly, tears slipping down his face. "I didn't see it coming. I should have seen it." The defense made a weak attempt to argue diminished capacity, citing Anna's mental health struggles, her history of isolation and discrimination. But it was too little, too late. The facts were overwhelming. Sympathy was in short supply. As closing arguments loomed, there was little doubt among those who sat through the grim testimony. Anna Palmer would be found guilty. Still, the weight of the verdict would be heavy, not just for Anna, but for a town forever altered by betrayal, grief, and a murder that no one would ever be able to explain away. The final day of Anna Palmer's trial began under leaden skies. Rain fell in a thin, steady drizzle, soaking the crowds gathered outside the courthouse inside. The tension was suffocating. The prosecution delivered a closing argument that cut through the courtroom like a scalpel. They reminded the jury of the trust Anna had shattered, the life she had stolen, the the deliberate choices she had made at every stage. They showed a picture of Lacey, smiling, bright-eyed, full of the future that Anna had extinguished. Premeditation isn't always written in letters, the prosecutor said, voice steady. Sometimes it's written in silence, in choices, in cruelty disguised as love. The defense offered little more than a final, hollow plea for leniency, citing Anna's struggles with mental health, her isolation, her desperation, but it was like shouting into a void. The damage had been done. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours. When they returned, the courtroom held its breath. Anna stood as the foreman read the verdict. Guilty of first-degree murder. Guilty of criminal transmission of HIV. Guilty of unlawful possession of a firearm. No reaction crossed Anna's face. She remained still, eyes fixed on some distant point beyond the walls, beyond the present. Sentencing followed swiftly. The judge, his voice heavy with finality, ordered Anna Palmer to serve life in prison without the possibility of parole. There would be no second chances, no appeals that could undo the blood on her hands. As Anna was led away, shackled, through the side door of the courtroom, Brian remained seated, staring blankly ahead. He didn't cry, he didn't move. It was as if the verdict had simply confirmed what he already knew, that the person he once welcomed into his family had destroyed it from within, and nothing, not justice, not punishment, could ever repair what had been broken. The town of Wyndham tried to move on. The Palmer house was sold quietly. The garage closed permanently. Brian disappeared from public life entirely, retreating into a solitude so deep that even former friends rarely caught glimpses of him. At Lacey's old high school, a modest scholarship fund was established in her name. A small, fragile attempt to honor the life that had been stolen. But in truth, Wyndham would never be the same. The town carried the scar of what had happened, visible in the wary glances of neighbors, the hollowed-out spaces left by absence. Anna Palmer lived out her days behind concrete walls and iron bars, another inmate in a system that would not forgive her. And Lacey Palmer, young, trusting, betrayed, remained frozen in memory, a reminder of how easily trust can be weaponized and how devastating its betrayal can be. There were no winners, only survivors, and the long, unspoken grief of a story no one would ever be able to forget.